Alberta is no stranger when it comes to property loss because of wildfire, flooding, and more. But sometimes dealing with the insurance company after a loss can be almost as traumatic as the loss itself. Here to help us navigate those claims is Danielle Bourgeois. She's a partner at Field Law, whose practice includes insurance claims. And Danielle is a regular contributor to our Wise Counsel Legal Calling. Welcome back, Danielle.
Thank you, Mark.
So how complicated can it be for a homeowner or a property owner to file a claim after they've had damage from something like wildfire or flooding?
It can actually be quite simple, Mark, as long as you make sure you keep the information handy. Obviously, the most important thing is to vacate your property and get to a safe area. And once you do have safe shelter set up, you should be looking at either reporting the claim through an emergency 1-800 number, or a lot of the insurance companies have online portals to report claims that are monitored 24 hours a day.
So what kind of things will the insurance company want from you and require before they pay out a claim?
Well, there's a lot of steps before a claim's paid out, and a lot of times it's paid out on interim steps. So they'll usually conduct their own investigation of the loss, as well as ask you for lists of items that were destroyed or damaged in or around the loss. So sometimes it's a good idea just to keep those lists ahead of time, because, of course, once it happens, it's hard for you to collectively decide what was in your house at that time. Your insurance company will typically have restoration experts that come in and recommend some immediate steps to preserve your property. And then there's the aftermath of deciding on repairs and companies that you want to go with. And again, insurance companies always collaborate with their insureds, and it's up to the homeowner to select the company that they decide to go with.
How long can it take to settle those claims?
It really depends on the extent of the damage and whether you're able to come to an agreement with your insurance company. And then, of course, when you do have huge catastrophic loss events like the Fort McMurray fires, for example, there can be quite a bit of backlog, but insurance companies are quite good at mobilizing units and mobilizing people to be able to address the needs of their insureds at that time.
So if it drags on, is there any recourse for homeowners who've been waiting a long time to settle a claim?
There is a dispute resolution process that you can invoke under the Insurance Act if you're having problems settling your claim, and that's a mandatory process once it's invoked, and it uses essentially sort of a mediator-style individual who's neutral to try and help you guys come to some sort of agreement. And then, of course, as sort of a last resort, there is the litigation route. And it's important to keep in mind that you have 2 years after the loss in order to bring a claim against an insurance company if that's the route you unfortunately have to take.
And who instigates the dispute resolution process?
It can be instigated by either the insured or the insurer.
And now, is there any kind of interim relief that the insurance company could help you out with in the interim, and do they often do that?
Yeah, there's usually a portion of a homeowner policy called the additional living expenses. And so that's the interim relief you see for lodging and food, that type of thing. Clothing, if you don't have access or if a lot of your stuff was destroyed. Typically, your insurance company will give you sort of a lump sum at the outset. And, if you provide estimates and keep receipts and stuff like that, you can usually work it out with your insurance company, subject to the limits of coverage in your insurance policy.
Now, anyone who's bought insurance knows it comes with a long contract with lots of fine print. I've never read mine because I have a life. How do people make sure they know exactly what's in the contract?
Well, Mark, reading it is a good step. And, a lot of times when you apply for these things, you might apply for insurance through a broker.
Yeah.
It's important to ask them a lot of questions at the outset.
Because they're kind of working for you, the broker, right? Aren't they?
Exactly. They're working for you, trying to find sort of the best deal and that suits your needs with the insurance company and that type of thing. So it's important to ask a lot of questions at that point. And for things like additional endorsements that you might want, like sewer backup, a lot of those things are extra. So you want to make sure you know what you're paying for and how much coverage you're also paying for.
What about exclusions from coverage? How do we make sure we've got, for instance, flooding coverage and what that covers? Because not all flooding is created equal, right?
It's true. Typically, groundwater and foundation leakage type of flooding is not covered by a policy. Roof leaks due to lack of maintenance is not usually covered. as well as you hear the sort of frozen pipe burst while I'm away on holidays type of thing.
Right.
If you don't have someone monitoring your property according to the policy, that can also not be covered.
So what would be covered then generally?
Well, you can things like fire, flooding, if by a force of nature, typically
So
those kind of
if a
things.
river overflows, down, 100 yards away from you and floods your house, you're probably covered, or
Probably, but I mean, as you know, there's a flood area in Edmonton where
on the floodplain.
on
Yeah.
the floodplain where insurance is it's specifically and it's on title to your land where insurance won't kick in for that type of thing.
Right, and you got to know. Okay, so what is your advice then for anybody to be buying insurance for their home or any other property they might have?
I think, a couple of things. Ensure that you're buying enough coverage in dollar amounts to replace your contents, personal property. So keep in mind things like high ticket items like jewelry, bicycles, electronics, computers. Those types of things add up. So make sure you're taking stock of that when you're purchasing insurance. You should always be forthright and candid to your insurer about the use of your property. If you're running a business out of it, if you're using it as a rental property, even if there's a relative that's staying there short term, you should be advising your insurer of any changes, because if you don't and something happens and the insurer discovers that you're not being candid and there's what they call a material change in risk, they could deny coverage. So it's important to stay in contact with your insurance company. Not be so worried about premiums changing, that type of thing. There is wiggle room, but just making sure you're being forthright about that.
And always get a good lawyer.
Exactly.
Danielle, thanks very much. Danielle Bourgeois is a lawyer at Field Law in Edmonton and a regular contributor to our Wise Counsel legal column.